kitchen with Chef Mario. I got a little different setup today, and you're probably saying to yourself, what is all this stuff here? You know, and I'll just let you know, I like to collect things, and this is a little bit of the larger collection of things over the years I want to share with you. But let's go back 30 years. You know, I moved to the Lehigh Valley. I was fresh out of the military. I was really looking for a career and a place to live, and I found my way to a dairy farm in Walnutport, Pennsylvania, and I worked on the dairy farm as a hired hand in exchange for room and board. I was just a young fellow out of the military, and I really, really fell in love, you know, being a city slicker with the farming environment. So with that said, over the years I've grown an affinity to the rural side of Pennsylvania, the old historical aspects of how we used to do things, some of the fixtures and food making apparatus and all the things that made life simple back then. It was hard work, but made it simple. I just fell in love with it. So today I want to demonstrate a little bit of that, you know. But first, real quick, I did go on a trip to Lancaster, which is definitely a throwback in the Amish country and the Mennonites, and I was there a week ago, and I bought this picture here. And this picture is by a gentleman named Ray Hendershot. And Ray is a very prolific local artist here in Pennsylvania who paints these gorgeous landscape scenes, typically of antique farmhouse settings in rural Pennsylvania. And I actually lived in a house very similar to this in Walnutport for about a year or two. I used to harvest watercress off the pond. I had my own garden. There was no electricity in it. It was extremely primitive but beautiful. And this is my happy place. Maybe you like something similar to this, or you have another version of it. But what I'm going to share with you today was indicative of how they used to live circa 17, 18, early 1900s. And just a few things. For example, they had, you know, cooking apparatus, things that prepared food, such as, you know, this Enterprise sausage press. And we're going to have that demonstrate on a future episode. You might have had something like, you know, some of this antique bakeware and stuff. This is a flour sifter for you younger folks who don't know about these things. They put the flour in it upside down, and then they would sift it to make it less clumpy. They use things like this. This is a grinder. I mean, you could put nuts in this grinder. It's tabletop mounted. You look at that. Senza electricity, manual labor. And this you could put meats or sausages. It would complement that piece of machinery over there. So these are the type of things that our ancestors 100, 200 years ago used. And I have a whole collection of this stuff I want to share with you later. But today I want to share with you a food that was so typical of this region and the world, but specifically this region of the States, that it was probably on the table nearly every day. And that is sauerkraut. Yes, I said sauerkraut. You might be saying, well, that's the stuff isn't that the stuff, that shredded stuff I put on my hot dog when I go to the Phillies game or the Iron Pigs? Yeah, but it's a little more than that. So, you know, I want to delve right into it, what this sauerkraut thing is all about. You might say to yourself, I don't like sauerkraut. Well, that's good. It's not about what you like. It's about what's good for you. It's about what's real, what's simple, what's affordable, what's healthy, and what are the benefits of this product. You know, so today I want to share with you how to make sauerkraut. So years and years ago, if I may demonstrate, they would use stuff like a crock. And I have a collection of this stuff here. Now this is a kiln-fired crock, excuse me. This is number 4, and the 4 insinuates how many gallons, you know, the crock was. A crock could be used for pickling, you know, whether it be dill pickles. A lot of times, most times, it was for kraut and things of that nature. Now, this jammer here, or this press, may not be fitting for this particular crock, because some of the crocks were upwards of 20 gallons. They were quite large. Over here, as you see, we have a 3-gallon crock, maybe circa 1930s or 40s. This one's about turn of the century right here. But this jigger right here, this is really neat. This is an original sauerkraut masher, and it's made of some sort of, I would say, hickory wood or so, and you can just see the age patina of how the acid and things over the years has split the original wood. But surprisingly, it's still intact. I mean, you could go out there and probably tamp your driveway with this thing. It's really serious. So we're going to demonstrate how, you know, some of this stuff was used in a primitive fashion back in the day, And it's just exciting to see what they did and the great efforts they made to make things we take for granted. Now, you could go out, you could buy it right here, right now. Forget all this. Buy it in a bag. $2.29, giant supermarket. You're in the kraut business. That's good and all, but it's not what you want. And don't get me wrong, in a pinch, at the picnic for the hot dog, put it in a crock, or put it in some sort of pan and warm it up and douse it on your hot dog, and that's good. And nothing against this brand, but this is limited. This is limited because it's not really from the table. Remember, table to you is much, much better for your health. So it's cheaper. And guess what? It gets the family involved and you get to do fun things. So what do? So I go to the famous Pennsylvania Dutch sauerkraut, cookbook here, and it has all the typical Pennsylvania Dutch fare. And there's several ways to make kraut. But today is going to be a typical way they made it circa 1800s. So we take basically your typical, domestic cabbage here. I don't know if the brand or the species is Savoy, but green cabbage. And you want to de-leaf it. Now here's a couple things to know about cabbage. You can make sauerkraut out of any kind of cabbage per se. I wouldn't think bok choy like a Chinese cabbage. You could if you had to really stretch it, but you want to use a good standard green domestic cabbage. If you can at all possible, you want to get organic cabbage. And there's a reason. One, the taste is different. Two, there's no sprays. A lot of cabbage that you buy, you'll see this white coating of this powdery substance on the outside of it. And that really is the sprays. They do industrial spray stuff to keep the critters off and I guess to promote whatever. That's not what you want, because you might say, I can just peel the outer layer off and I'll be done with it. Now, the sprays make their way inside all the membrane of the fruit and the vegetable. So getting yourself some good organic cabbage is going to do yourself a world of good. So you could use a myriad of knives to cut your cabbage. You can go for this big knife like this, press down on it. Didn't core that too good, but your idea is to cut it in half, and then you want to half it again to obviously make quarters. Okay? So as you make the quarters there, you want to cut with the core, so you get, now that gives you an opportunity to dissect the core out, or the center stem part. You don't want that. That's, as we talk in previous passages, that's undesirable. There's probably something you can do with that, but as a whole, you don't want that. It's too hard, and it's got no flavor. So we're going to cut on an angle, in keeping with the way nature made it, and core all those sections out. You know what? There's not a lot of cooking in this episode. You're going to notice there's no heat, there's no oven, there's no garlic, there's no oil. It's funny I talk like this because I'm from Philadelphia. I grew up in this Italian community, and it was predominantly, Italian. And, my mother happens to be Pennsylvania Dutch, but my other side is Italian. And I always talk about olive oil and wine and pasta and all these dishes from the Mediterranean. And my mom wakes up one day and she hears me talking all this Italian stuff, and she says, you do know you're half German, right? And I said, yeah. Start talking about German stuff. I guess that's what she meant. And not that she was anti-Italian, but sometimes I forget the beauty of the other ethnicity I was privileged to be part of. And this is part of it. So sauerkraut, it goes way back to the Chinese. 2,000 years ago, they invented this fermented cabbage process that we're going to demonstrate here today. It wasn't until about 1,000 or 1,200 years later that the Germans picked up the concept, and obviously they made it famous. They perfected the sauerkraut, and this is part of what German culture is about. And it doesn't take refrigeration to make good sauerkraut, which reminds me of an old Italian joke. How do you say refrigerator in Italian? That's ice-a-box. So we don't need no ice-a-box here. All you need is good fresh cabbage. You don't need anything else but cabbage, salt. You don't need any vinegar, unlike what you thought you might need. You don't really need any other spices. Although some cultures, Hungarian, other ethnicities surrounding the greater Bavarian area will use caraway seed. I've even seen Russian people put a bay leaf and caraway seed in their sauerkraut. I keep using that word coleslaw because basically sauerkraut is fermented coleslaw of sorts. And ultimately, we're looking for this shredding process. So how do we achieve that shredding process? There's a host of ways we can do it. One, we can take, I'll just use this core thing. We could take this famous cheese shredder and grater, and if you desire, all these little things here. Huh. If you desire a texture like that, which I probably wouldn't recommend, you could use a cheese grater, and that looks good and all, but it's really not the typical sauerkraut texture you're looking for. So we'll just put that aside for a moment. There's other jiggers out there, and I got that word from my wife's grandmother. She was Dutch, Esther Kunzman, God rest her soul, and she called everything that didn't have a name or she didn't know a name for it, a gadget, or she called it a jigger. And so I used that term, I adopted it from her. And this here is a typical cabbage slicer. I mean, obviously there's a name for it. It's called a mandolin, if you want to get technical about it. And you would put it into the bowl, and then you would take your cabbage, and there was no NSF or OSHA rated hand safety guard back then, and you would just work your way onto the now this is an old one. Look at that. It's not seating properly. So, all right. So I'm just pressing up on the blade, and as you can see in the back, I'm getting a byproduct of my activity. So that was typical of what you used back 1800s. This probably goes turn of the century. It's a hardwood with some real cast iron hardware, an apparatus here to bolt to the table or some sort of bowl that you're putting it in. And then there's another process right here, which I find to be quite fancy, and that's a modern day mandolin. You can get this just about anywhere, any big box store. They do have the fancy guard that you can put it in the track, and you can get less blood in the sauerkraut that way. I like that. This one has a particular setting on it. It's got lock mode, anti-kid mode, and then it's got number 1, 2, 3, depending on the depth you're trying to achieve, and that's pretty neat. I put it on number 2. Let's see what it does. That's pretty good there. But what you want to do when you use a mandolin is you want to turn it. You want to turn it to the layered side. If you turn it flat, you're going to get large disc-type pieces of cabbage. You don't want that. You want strainy cabbage like this. And in order to achieve that, you have to turn it to the layered side, if you will, and kind of angle it. And this way, you'll get that spaghetti effect with your cabbage, as you see. So that's certainly another method of extracting your cabbage or slicing it down to the preferred side. There's a lot of. Might sit down for a second. There's a lot of health benefits to what we're doing here. A lot of people say that, what could cabbage do for you? Well, first of all, raw cabbage, as we know, when we grind it, the organic stuff, and make juice out of it, it does wonders for ulcers. It does wonders for digestive problems such as acid reflux. It'll actually cure ulcerative colitis in a great way if you drink raw cabbage juice, a glass a day, about 9 ounces. I talked about this before in a previous episode. Look it up. Raw cabbage juice is a absolute healer. What happens when we put it in this commercial form, when we take raw cabbage and we go to the final product of this process, bagged sauerkraut, we lose a lot of what nature intended for us. So in order to keep the medicinal aspects, remember, food is medicine. I don't care what you say. You can take all this and take that, but you can heal most ailments with the right diet and the right foods. I believe that. You may not, but I've seen the effects of good eating and what it can do. So when we eat raw cabbage, such as this, or fermented cabbage, we actually can lose weight. Did you know that? Because it is full of fiber, and when you ferment cabbage in this capacity, you have very low calories. So you're filling your stomach with something, and you're telling your mind you're not hungry. Thus, you're creating a weight loss environment, that ketosis process where you jumpstart your metabolism into burning fat. This also, sauerkraut, it jacks your immune system up because it's very full of probiotics. And actually, raw coleslaw and sauerkraut in this capacity, it actually helps prevent leaky gut syndrome, if you ever heard that before. It's also been known to lower stress. And it lowers stress by creating, this does here, by creating a good bacteria in your body. And that's what I want to share in a few moments about how that bacteria process works in your system. And you might say, bacteria, who needs that? Well, you do. We have good bacteria and bad bacteria. I'm certainly not giving health advice here, but I know that some of this stuff is very common knowledge. You can look it up. And a lot of the reasons we're sick and don't have what we have in our body is because of our gut health, if you will. Back to the shredding again. I bought these on the internet. I think I paid $20-something including shipping. I found them to be kind of trusty and definitely handy. So going against the grain. Let me take this loose outer one off. Going against the layers, that gives me the desired effect as well. So look how fast that is. Wow, that sure beats that old wooden mandolin. I mean, I like the historical aspect of the mandolin there, but it really, it's not as productive as one of these handheld shredders. And some of these are good for peeling large layers, and some of them are good for potato skins. But that gives us, again, some of the typical shredding that we're looking for.
Smart home security provided by Altronic Security Systems keeps your home safe and comfortable with a single tap from your smartphone. Turning in for the night, simply turn your system to stay, and your system secures the perimeter of your home. Adjust your thermostat for a comfortable night, and check that your doors are locked, the garage is locked, and the lights are out as you head to bed. That's smart home security. Call Altronics today for your free in-home consultation.
As the years turn, it's only natural your needs will evolve and possibly outgrow the current spaces in your home. That doesn't mean you need a new home, just a new way to reimagine the space you've got to work with. Don't just hire a construction crew. Bring in a partner you can trust from concept to completion. Anthony Builders. The best way to start is with a phone call. Contact us to discuss your project or arrange an evaluation. To find out about everything we do, visit us online. Thanks.
Some salt. I use good sea salt here. I don't want iodized. There's a reason. It's more for health reasons. And you want to layer a little bit of salt in the bottom of your bowl, and then you're going to put a small helping of the shredded cabbage there. Now, typically you would use, obviously, that great big hammer jigger I showed you with with the handle for the 10-gallon thing, but we're not at that rate. We're trying to keep it at, my wife says, keep it on a home scale level here instead of an industrial complex level. I said, you're right. So typically you can do two things. You can use a potato masher. I had 3 of them. They're somewhere in storage. You know how it is. You look for something when you can't find it. Okay. In this sense, I got this tenderizer. All this has been sterilized, and don't be afraid to use your hands, especially if they're clean. This is how Grandma did it, and you're gonna press that cabbage. And what is your goal with that? It's not that you're trying to pack it in to get more. You're really trying to create a brine. And how you create the natural brine of the cabbage is by continuing to press it. And what that does is the salt and the pressing movement extracts the liquid from the cabbage, because cabbage obviously is a high water content. So there's a reason we want to extract the liquid. It's not that we just throw this stuff in a bowl and put vinegar and salt on it like everything you think is Pennsylvania Dutch. That's not how it works. There's a process. And if it's not done right, you're going to not wind up with sauerkraut. You're going to wind up with sour something, and you ain't going to like it. So let's do it right. So we can get that cabbage, if we get the camera back in here, and we can get that cabbage and we can continue to massage the cabbage. You can even do a partial shred, okay, where we're breaking down the membranes of the cabbage. And then see how all of a sudden it's got like it's got a liquidy aspect to it. Because what are we doing? We're extracting the fluid from the. So now we're going to bring in another layer like that. It's almost like Dutch lasagna, okay? Just not as tomatoey. And we're going to go back to the salt factor. Typically, you're going to do 1.5 tablespoons per 10 pounds of cabbage. I might be a little aggressive on here with the salt, but I'm just doing that for instructional purposes. So we're going to continue to work the cabbage. It's a little bit of a tedious process, and after you get done making something as so-called simple as this, I use that word loosely, you'll start to appreciate what our ancestors did and how they brought good things to the table. Because anybody can go to big box and just buy something off the shelf. It's like what went into that process to make that, and this is what went into it. It's called effort, love, TLC, necessity, and this is what our ancestors did. So now we've got that going. We're going to continue to layer upon layer. We're just starting to get the desired effect of our sauerkraut, and its early stages of making. Now this is about, I'm going to say about a whole head of cabbage, just on a micro scale to give you an idea of what you're up against or what you're trying to accomplish on a small scale. Maybe about 1.5 tablespoons, if that, of salt. And I've been working it for a good 10 minutes or so. And I've pressed it down. I've softened the membrane of the cabbage up. And as you can see, there's much liquid that's in this. But they didn't realize the fermenting actually gave good bacteria to your body. It's actually different from eating raw cabbage, and it's different from cooking cabbage, steamed cabbage, halupkis, whatever. The fermenting part actually creates the good bacteria that acts as a natural probiotic. So when you were taking antibiotics for your cold or your flu, whatever, remember, you were destroying good bacteria in your gut. So you have millions and trillions of, I'll call it gut flora cells in your body. Remember, your stomach and your gut is your second brain. If you don't feed your second brain with good stuff, your whole body's out of whack. You're going to have a poor immune system. You're just not going to function right. So this helps put enzymes back into your body, and it helps balance out the good and the bad bacteria levels that are much needed. Did you know that sauerkraut also is loaded with vitamin K2? You know what vitamin K2 is known for? It is the greatest bone strengthener in the entire vitamin mineral periodic table. K2 is #1 on making healthy, strong bones. I'll tell you what, folks, look at the German people. They're rugged people. You say what you want, but they're tough, they're hardworking, they're resilient, and they're not plagued, at least the old folks back in the day aren't plagued with the diseases that some of this modern stuff has given us. Why? Because of things such as sauerkraut. And it's just awesome to talk about the medicinal aspects of sauerkraut, how it's high in antioxidants, which has been proven to reduce certain levels of cancer cells in our body. Obviously, antioxidants they fight the free radicals, what have you. So the health benefits, we could go on and on. It reduces stress because certain properties in sauerkraut. So here's the goal. The goal is when we go into the final process of making sauerkraut, ultimately we want to go into a crock. This little crock here happens to have a lid on it, which was somewhat airtight back in the day. These did come with lids. However, to find them is like hen's teeth because they all broke in transition or kids bust them in the basement playing around. And a lid for these crocks is next to impossible to find. If you do, it's worth more than the crock. So what Nanny used to do and the old timers used to do is if they didn't have a lid, they would take a plate. Now you see the juice in here, the brine, as I demonstrated, the brine is somewhat liquidy. You want to work this more and more to where you have a 1/2 inch brine that's above your kraut. And all it is just water and salt, but working it correctly for a half hour. The plate, that's perfect. Look at that. So you probably want to go on top. The plate is very clean. Don't use something that's out of the garage that's full of bacteria. You want to get something that's very sanitary, and you want to press down on that plate. And you want to make sure that most of the plate is submerged in brine. So if you work it more, you're going to get more of a brine coverage. And when you do that, you lessen the risk of improper fermentation. So ultimately, if you're going to store this in a basement, even with the crock, you're going to want to get some kind of a sealer on it. Why? I don't like critters in my food. If you're going to store this in a cool, dry place, remember back over here, they had the smokehouse, they had a spring house that had a spring going through, but a lot of times they had a root cellar. And then the root cellar was where you would put your onions, your potatoes, your kraut, all the things you tried to store long-term cool to get long life out of it. In this case, we don't have root cellars in most of these houses today, but we do have a basement that's concrete, so to speak. So you want to, oh boy, this jigger isn't working too good. You want to cover this so we don't have unfriendly visitors in your kraut making process. And so that's a little bit about how you're going to do that. Making sure it's quasi airtight. And what's going to happen is, how long does it take to ferment? Well, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of conjecture out there. But from what I see and learned, somewhere between 2 and 4 weeks is when the fermenting really starts to happen. It wouldn't be a problem if you went down there and removed this every week or so, and you tossed the sauerkraut into making a round, and you recovered it, and you checked on the fermentation process, making sure that you're going down the road the right way. But it could take upwards of 90 days, depending on your climate, how tart you want it, and how much of a sour bite you like from your kraut. That's all going to depend. Come on back in 30 seconds. I'm going to show you a final dish that incorporates this world famous sauerkraut. You're going to love it, and best of health to you. I'll be back in a minute.
Hi, I'm Cliff from AV Car Care Center. 2 locations in town here, South 5th Street and Tillman Street. Everybody knows they're supposed to check their oil periodically, but how about their antifreeze? Too many people overlook checking their antifreeze cold in the morning before you run the car so you don't get burned. That's this mysterious cap over here. Today's cars with plastic radiators and plastic fittings seep antifreeze constantly. It's something you need to keep an eye on before you have a problem on the road.
I am St. Michael's.
I am St. Michael's.
I am St. Michael's.
You want the best for your child. At St. Michael the Archangel School, we want the best for our students. Offering structure, a challenging curriculum, and individualized attention based in faith to develop the whole person, mind, body, and spirit.
I am St. Michael's.
I am St. Michael's.
I
am St. Michael's.
I'll tell you folks, who says sauerkraut ain't good? It all depends what you put with it. Here's a typical fare that you can use sauerkraut with after you get done fermenting. I got this beautiful, I wanted to get bratwurst, but I couldn't find it. Got some beautiful Polish kielbasa and some cubed potatoes and that wonderful sauerkraut out there that accompanies any dish. Use it as a side dish. Super healthy for you, super easy to make. Save the money, save your health, change your gut, change your life. Thanks for checking in this week with Newburgh Deli. This is Mario, Chef Mario of Nazareth, PA. I wish you the very best. God bless you, and God bless this great country. See you next week.
I am St. Michael's.
I am St. Michael's.
I am St. Michael's.
You want the best for your child. At St. Michael the Archangel School, we want the best for our students. Offering structure, a challenging curriculum, and individualized attention based in faith to develop the whole person, mind, body, and spirit.
I am St. Michael's.
I am St. Michael's.
I
am St. Michael's.